So my name's Joe Lazito. I've been at the SCC now 3 times. This is my second time doing the technology cluster. I was here at Vassar last year for this. So it's going to be interesting to do it virtually. We'll see how this works with Zoom. We're going to start by doing a quick round of introductions with the mentors. You've probably read our bios in the materials, but I thought we could each just do a quick intro of who we are, what our major was, what our current job is in the technology industry, and just very quickly kind of how we got there. So I'll start and I'll hand it around. So again, Joe Lazito, class of 93, still sporting that mug from 1993, still going. I was a computer science major. I was actually the 6th computer science major that Vassar had. Because when I joined as a freshman, there was only a math CS major. They didn't have computer science as its own major. Then in my junior year, they created it, and I was the 6th one to sign up to do it. So it was kind of fun. It was being created, as I was studying it. And then I spent the 90s really after I graduated in software development at a small company in Manhattan. And over the course of the 2000s and 2010s, I jumped around from different digital agencies doing software development for internet sites, basically for websites. So it was when these agencies were changing from like traditional ad agencies to these more digital agencies that were focused on the internet. So I was doing coding at the time in HTML and so forth, and then I eventually started leading teams of coders. And now I've moved on to a larger company called Accenture, which you might have heard of, one of these big consultancies. And I lead a team that delivers all of their digital sites and any kind of digital stuff for their clients in the Northeast. So I lead delivery of digital for the Northeast. So that's kind of the career path I ended up taking. And as we'll talk about during this cluster, you never know when you get your first job where you're going to end up as you go on all those different stepping stones of your journey. And you'll hear that from the mentors as we go around. So that's a little about me. Let's hand it over. Carlos, I see you on my top left, so I'll call on you next.
Sure thing. Hello, everyone. I'm Carlos. I'm class of 2014. I'm calling in from Sao Paulo, Brazil right now. And a little bit about me. At Vassar, I majored in urban studies. So I took a lot of art, geography, and a little bit of cognitive science as well. During my time there, really, I was focusing a lot on design and innovation. And after Vassar, I went to study architecture at the Harvard Design School. But right now, even though I still do design things and I still see myself as a designer, I work in the digital product design space as a UX or user experience research lead at a startup, at a financial technology startup in Brazil called Nubank. So that's just one example in which, what you study at Vassar can lead you any number of ways. I'm super passionate about the role that technology can play in sort of changing people's lives and improving them. So that's why I chose to focus in UX, in the UX design world. And so far, it's been super enjoyable. I think it requires a lot of multidisciplinary thinking, a lot of drawing from different areas of knowledge to try to really understand your users and how the technology that you're designing fits into their lives. So that's a little bit about me. Welcome. Nice to see you.
Thanks, Carlos. Definitely calling from the coolest location of all of us. Next, I have Cindy. Cindy, you want to go?
Sure. Do you want me to turn my phone on? Yeah, let me do that. Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Cindy. I didn't know what I wanted to do out of college. I was a cog sci major. I had done computer science and a few other things. After bopping around a bit, I fell into quality assurance engineering, and from there made the departure or jump into software development. Out of college, they weren't really interested in hiring me without experience, which is always something that you need. You need experience to get experience. Anyway, at the time, in the early 90s, there wasn't a lot of the creative technology that we have now. At this point, and a varied and interesting path that I wove. I'm director of technology at a small startup in Boston. And I'm really enjoying that a lot. And I hope to tell you more about it.
Awesome. Thanks, Cindy. Henry, you want to go next?
Sure. So I was a science, technology, and society major just because I was interested in a lot of things and I didn't want to take a bunch of classes in just one department. And I was also interested in architecture, so I studied abroad in Copenhagen to do studio there. And that's where I learned about the broader field of design and eventually design research. And it was actually an alumna who connected me with my first internship in a design consultancy at Frog. And from there, it was another alum who referred me to a position at her team at Google for user experience research. And at Google, I've been a UX program manager, product manager, and now a researcher in there. And so I'm just happy to provide any tips. I know I've gotten a lot of help from Vassar on the way. I'm happy to pay it forward.
Yeah, Henry, that's a topic we're definitely going to touch on. Kelly, you want to go next?
Hi, sorry, my video's in and out. My Wi-Fi has been kind of choppy, so I've learned that turning off my video has made the Wi-Fi faster. So anyway, sorry, I'm Kelly. I'm class of 2017. I was originally going to come to study math and econ. Sorry, hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're a little bit choppy. You can keep your video off if you want, if that helps the Wi-Fi.
Sorry about that. If it gets really bad, I'll just call in from my phone and use LTE Magic. But yeah, so I started as a math and econ major, but then my friend was like, hey, maybe you should take a computer science class. And I fell in love with it and decided to do computer science and math, double major. And then actually my first internship was also through a Vassar connection with one of my friends at the school. And so I ended up working at a 20-person startup with a pretty established product. And then after that, actually connected with a different Vassar alum and landed at a company called Affirm, which is a fintech. And at both places, I started off as full stack engineers and more recently have moved more into backend work. And I think that's it. I'm calling in from New Jersey. I don't know what people heard because I saw the videos like freeze and unfreeze a bunch of times. So I'm super sorry. I think I'm gonna.
That was clear.
Okay, cool. Okay.
Yep.
Sorry about that.
No worries. Mario, you want to go?
There you go.
Yep.
Hi, everyone. My name is
much better.
My name is Mario. I was an econ major. Didn't take any comp sci classes in Vassar. Eventually, my first role outside of Vassar, when I graduated, I worked as a research assistant at the Federal Reserve Board. And that got me into data analytics and working with data. So I really like that and creating different data visualization pieces with the economists I was working with. From there, I moved to my first consulting job at EY. I was doing audit readiness for the Army. I really wanted to get into analytics, but when I was trying to look for different projects, I just wasn't able to find the type of stuff that I was looking for. But I came across a coding boot camp through a company called General Assembly, and they have boot camps for software engineering, digital marketing, and data science. So I enrolled in their full-time 3-month data science boot camp, learned how to code in Python. This was like a couple of years ago. And from there, I got hired by Deloitte. And I worked on some cool projects, but currently I'm working on a project with the IRS Criminal Investigations, which is the law enforcement arm of the IRS. And I work directly with agents. I help them with dark web intel, and now I'm currently learning how to work on cases that involve cryptocurrencies.
So cool that you mentioned the dark web. I love it. We'll see if we talk about that more. I don't know if we can talk about it. It might be illegal. That's awesome, Mario. Thanks. Phil, I think we have you next.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Phil. You might hear some crying baby in the background during during the next hour or so. If so, just please ignore it. We have an infant.
Parenting right there. Ignore the crying baby.
Yeah, so I am currently working at a company or a firm called FireEye. So I'm in the cybersecurity business. I manage a team of 4 data scientists there. And we work on a bunch of different projects across the organization, including things like, your typical antivirus or anti-malware solution, some stuff similar to what Mario mentioned with respect to kind of ingesting data from the dark web or other social sources and trying to make sense of it, looking for hacker forum speak and things like that, and looking for any kind of threats that are out there in the digital world. So I graduated from Vassar in 2010 with a computer science degree. I took courses also in math and philosophy and English. Encourage you guys to take a variety of different courses as well, not just for the sake of getting a major or a minor, but just to explore. After Vassar, directly after Vassar, I went on to do a PhD in computer science. I focused on computational neuroscience, which is at a high level, trying to understand how different phenomena in the brain work through simulation of large-scale networks of neurons. And so that was kind of the beginning of the big boom in AI and its foray into enterprise workflows. So timing-wise, got lucky there in terms of taking advantage of that boom. After that PhD, though, which was a lot more kind of basic science type of work, I moved on to cybersecurity, and that's where I am now. So I haven't been at FireEye for 5 years, but I've been in cybersecurity for 5.5 years now. Right after the PhD, I went into a startup, which was when I joined 40 employees, and I rode the wave until 200 employees before leaving. So kind of have that like small, small company type of experience. And now, we're working at FireEye. This is a company with over 3,000 employees. It's like a global firm. And so I kind of have that other side of the coin experience as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Phil. So great. So that's our panel of mentors. You heard a lot of different areas across sort of the technology spectrum that we just talked about. And I'm proud of everybody for keeping the buzzwords and acronyms to a minimum. So hopefully it was all understandable what we were talking about. But you heard everything from kind of user experience and software engineering, coding. You heard QA, cybersecurity, data science, cryptocurrency. These are all different aspects of technology. So one of the things I'd like to do, since we have a pretty small group, I'd like to go around and ask the students who are here just for a quick introduction, just your name and if you have an area of concentration, computer science or whatever it is, let us know. But I'd also just love to hear what made you pick the technology cluster. So when you think about technology, what comes to mind? Is it coding? Is it like application development? Is it things like security, data? It could be any of those things. It could be user experience design, digital design. So I'd just love to hear what was on your mind when you selected the tech cluster. I'll go down the list just in alphabetical order, and we can call on folks that way. Okay. So Byram, I have you first. Would you like to go?
Sure. I'm class of 2023. I'm a computer science major, and I guess I kind of think of all of these things. I'm really interested in coding, but I'm also really interested in design. I spend a lot of time thinking about how users rely really heavily on the people who spend time designing UIs and UXs. And the only reason anyone ever enjoys using a piece of software is because of the work that they put into it. So.
Excellent. Thanks, Byram. Yeah, we can, I bet Carlos and a couple others could talk about how good UX versus bad UX and how that impacts people's lives. So let's get back to that. That's a great topic. Eric, I have you next.
Yeah, hi, Eric, class of 2023 from New Jersey. I just declared computer science major this last semester. Didn't have a lot of experience with comp sci and technology coding stuff prior to Vassar. So still kind of trying to figure out what area I want to go in. I haven't had a lot of exposure with data science or cybersecurity, but those topics seem interesting to me. But I've also like done a lot of just basic front end, development kind of stuff on my own. So I've enjoyed that as well.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Jordan.
Hi, I'm Jordan, obviously class of 2023, biochem neuroscience double major. So really for me, technology is going to be more on the like data analysis side of things. So yeah.
Great. It's a great area to be in right now. Jude.
Yeah, I'm also a computer science major. So class of 2023. I'm not really sure where I want to be in particular since I'm still like exploring. I think like I'm actually interested in data science, cybersecurity, and basically app development. So I'm still like navigating which path I should actually take. So
that's totally fine. Cool. Rohan.
Hi. One sec, sorry. Yeah, my name is Rohan. I am a computer science major and potential philosophy minor. I'm an international student from India. And the reason I chose computer science is because I'm fascinated in a lot of things and I still don't really know where I want to go. But in that, computer science applies to everything. I mean, you all are proof enough of that. So it's nice and broad. And also, it's the next frontier. If you have the chance in the 1960s in the space race to work on spaceships, why wouldn't you? If you're in the digital age and you get to work on technology, why wouldn't you? So I feel like, how could I not go into comp sci in some form? I don't know where that's going to take me, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little about the different areas and what are the most up and coming ones right now. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah. I am a math and econ double major. And I've taken a couple comp sci classes and I really enjoyed them. And in my math major, I'm on a statistics track. So I'm definitely interested in like research, data analysis, data science, like interpreting those results, applying them to like society or like whatever. So I think it's just like really interesting and will be really helpsel in sort of what I'm interested in. So yeah.
Excellent. And Srashta.
Yeah, hi, I'm Shrashta. I'm also a comp sci major and I'm an international student from Nepal. I'm also kind of exploring what I'm interested in. I didn't have a lot of experience in tech before coming to Vassar, so I've taken a few classes at Vassar and kind of just exploring what I'm interested in.
Great. Well, welcome. So I think that was everybody. Awesome. Well, thanks. I mean, it's great to hear so many computer science majors. So glad to hear Vassar turning out computer science majors. So I'd like to just hit on a couple of the topics we heard on. And Carlos, I might call on you first. Let's talk a little about user experience, how that affects people's lives. Let's start with you, and if the other mentors want to chime in.
Sure thing, and perhaps Henrik can chip in here a little bit as well. But like some of you mentioned, I think, teams and really work in technology is incredibly multidisciplinary. So really in my day-to-day teams, I've got people from all the disciplines represented here, from data scientists to software engineers and data analysts. So of course, a big part of that is what you would call sort of the front stage of technology, and that's where UX and UX designers and researchers, product designers, sort of come in. So we, as a UX researcher, you can be involved throughout different stages of a product or a technology life cycle, from need finding, so really trying to go out there and trying to find what the areas of opportunities are, really deeply understand the customers or the users' context and pain points and sort of unmet needs, so that you can then develop product and technology to fit them and to match them. So I think we tend to bridge UX, I think really bridges the business areas with technology areas as well, and really sits at the table representing sort of the user's point of view. And so there's a lot of exploratory strategic research you can do, and typically you'll be working with product managers and business analysts in that, or you can also be on the more sort of validation track, working with product designers or engineers to sort of validate and improve an already existing solution. So I think for those of, UX has also been booming a lot in the last couple of years. I think the pandemic also is sort of working in our favor in that sense, because everything we do is mediated by technology. And, whether it's your 70-year-old grandma or your 10-year-old who's attending classes, you need to make sure that the technology is able to be friendly to many different kinds of users. So I think that's really proven the relevance of UX as a whole. A couple of you mentioned sort of an interest in research and statistics. Of course, we deal with user data in a number of ways, from survey information all the way to a more kind of ethnographic and anthropological research approach. So I found myself sort of really liking UX because it's so multidisciplinary and it's so diverse and varied, and it requires many different skill sets and a really kind of inherent creativity. So that's a little bit of what UX, I think, is in my view. And if technology is an arrow, I think we would say, like, we're often acting on the arrowhead side of things.
Great, thanks, Carlos. Anybody else want to jump in, the mentors?
Yeah, I think of UX as kind of like the gateway for people. It's like what they're interacting with, and like to me, there's magic back-end technology, which is what more of the computer science and like software engineers and all of them do. But I think UX is also a great opportunity for people who might not be as interested in like the hardcore data or engineering part of it, but just showing there's lots of different ways to be involved in technology. So in research, a lot of what we're looking for is like the core just research skills that I've heard some people talk about, of having a question, figuring out what methods to answer that question, and then analyzing the data to kind of show insights and then provide impact from there. But you can come at it from a lot of different ways. There's like UX design. Everything that you see that you're interacting with technology, somebody designed it. So there's, if people are more of like an artistic bend from there, but there's a lot in a product team to get something working. You could be kind of a generalist, like a program manager as well.
Yeah. Yeah, we can't overemphasize the importance of good user experience, because you know it when you don't have it. I always use the story of, for those of you in Jersey, of the New Jersey Transit app. When I used to take the train and not just work from home all the time, I used the app every day to buy a ticket, because I wouldn't go in the entire month, so I didn't buy a monthly. I would have to buy one on the days I go in. And the app used to be very simple. I would just, bring it up, kind of buy previous ticket, confirm, and I'm done. I would have the ticket. Then they upgraded the app, and it took, what took 2 clicks, then took 6, because I had to choose the path I wanted to take again. I had to confirm the credit card. I had to put in the CVV number, whatever that thing is. Then I had to confirm. And it's like, so that's just a great example of, they obviously did not do their research about how users were using the app when they upgraded it. They actually made it a barrier. They put barriers up between what I wanted to do and the simplest possible task. They actually had it better in the old app.
Did anybody mention the Norman doors yet?
No.
So the Norman doors are all about the doors that should be the easiest doors to open, but they're not. There's also the quintessential teapot problem. How do you design a good teapot? The opposite of a good design for a teapot is to have the spout and the handle on the same side, right? So, I mean, it's user design in the very basic forms, and you know, software is no different. I was just looking at you know, to use a, we're integrating a scheduler into our conversational AI platform so that people can go on, schedule a conversation, and then get online and we record the conversation. And the UI on one is really good, and the UI on another is not so good, but the API is better. So it's like we're people focused on
Right.
the design, you know. And I will note that I, you know, as a cog-sci major, I then jumped into QA, then jumped into coding, and then jumped into film, and then went back to grad school to do dynamic media. So that was all about user experience, dynamic interaction. Like, how do you expect to your system to react to the user, expected ways and unexpected ways. Really interesting area.
Yep. And very much, Carlos, I think you said it, very much a bridge between kind of understanding the business needs, right? Understanding the users and understanding what the backend can do, right? Cindy, you were mentioning APIs. We have, as you're designing both the UX and the visual design, you have to understand what's going to be possible or feasible from, you know, any backend you might be working with. So you become that bridge between what's needed from a user and business perspective and what can actually be developed. Do you have any stories about how that has worked good or bad when you've been doing it?
I just wanted to jump in really quickly on just more background of what Cindy was saying. I think there's a really good book called The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman, and the door example.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, have you seen the doors that say push or pull? Like, you shouldn't have to say push or pull.
Yeah.
Whether to push and pull, and it's really annoying when you have a pull handle on a push door. So more background on that.
Yep.
Yeah, one quick thing I'd mention too, you know, when it comes to the security space, security and UX can oftentimes be very oppositional in nature, right? So when you log in somewhere and you get a two-factor pop-up where you get a code sent to your phone, or when you download a new file to your laptop and things slow down for a second, well, they shouldn't, but things slow down because your antivirus is scanning that file for malicious indicators, right? Right. So there's, or you know, you make a credit card purchase and it gets blocked, and you have Capital One on the phone with you in the next second trying to ensure that that was a, you know, so there's a lot of these, right? So if the security team always had their way, things would be locked down. It would make it really, really difficult for users to access the information or the use cases that they want. Versus the UX team, which you know, they want to make it as seamless as possible. So it kind of creates that not friction, but you know, again, it creates this opportunity to talk between teams. And one of those examples in which I'm not sure if any of the UX folks on the call have worked with security teams, but you know, in which you kind of have to enter a new mindset of well, there's sacrifices and constraints I have to think about when the problem is framed in a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can chip in, I working in financial technology, we work really closely all the time with our fraud and cybersecurity teams because, for example, a huge component of the experience of using a banking app is that you feel safe and you trust that it is that it will protect your information, it will protect, more importantly, your money. And so, you know, when we work with users and cybersecurity teams, we sort of have to understand, okay, what are the requirements coming in from the cybersecurity side? And then also what is sort of productive friction that the users would like to have and would like to endure in order to make sure that their money is safe in a certain app, you know? And so I think that particularly in the realm of financial technology, I think, you know, we're constantly having to have these conversations around security, and also, you know, what really is the user perception of what we're doing, and also what will be a solution that tries to bridge and satisfy both requirements.
Yeah.
But it's always about trade-off, and that's why I think it's also, if I can just plug in the liberal arts right here, because you're constantly in rooms having to articulate, having to sort of really approach one issue from many different angles. And I think that's one way in which I've definitely felt like my liberal arts background has helped build that bridge between team members and when different trade-offs have to be made.
Awesome. I think that was a great example, the kind of push and pull between the ease of use of logging in and signing up, but also security, you know. And I'm actually also working in the financial services space with a client right now, where our user experience team is very much trying to get them comfortable with kind of that idea of a magic link, right? Where you just kind of put in your email, it sends you a link, and that helps you register more quickly. But the insurance company's tech team is dead set against it. So we're going through a bunch of kind of proof of concepts around, can that be secure enough to make them comfortable? And sometimes it just, you have to show that, look, there are banking companies that are doing it, or other companies that are doing it. And other times you have to go through some real hoops to kind of, you know, for that push and pull to really work. It's a good example, Phil and Carlos. Anything else? Any questions from the students around this UX topic? No? Okay, great. I'd like to drill into what you had just brought up around the liberal arts education thing, Carlos, and how it's helped all of us kind of in our jobs and where we landed. I think what you brought up around, you know, we're often in rooms where we have to articulate issues or, you know, kind of see a broad range of things from different angles. I thought that was really well put. I also, I found for me, I think the reason I ended up going from coding, which was kind of my first love coming out of school, to more kind of managing coders and teams was because at Vassar I had also acted and I was in a band. So I very much had a performer streak to me as well, which I was able to do at school. And I did it when I moved into Manhattan as well. So I think that ability to kind of take technology and coding and, you know, how that work is done and explain it to non-technical people in a way that, you know, came across because of that liberal arts background and because of the sort of experience and good fortune I had to be able to perform, that all helped in my career because I was able to use that skill in a tech and non-tech space. Any mentors have other thoughts around liberal arts and how it's helped?
I can jump in here.
Yeah, Kelly.
I think, yeah, I just to piggyback off of what everybody said, like, I don't know if I necessarily have like a fresh take, just like to emphasize how important the communication is. Like, I'm really fortunate to work under a director of engineering who came from a liberal arts college. And that's, I don't think, something that you see a lot in the Bay Area, at least from my experience. I've always worked under people from big tech schools. But my particular director came from a liberal arts college. And one time me and another Vassar grad had been talking to him and he was like, "You two went to Vassar. I'm so happy about that. We need more liberal arts people and I love hiring liberal arts people because we can have conversations, like we can talk to people." And in my particular team, we work a lot with merchants and we work a lot. So I work at a point of sale loan company, so also in the financial services space. And one thing that we have to constantly balance is dealing with merchant requirements and user requirements and trying to understand both of those pieces. And on my particular team, it's like sometimes we have to get on a call with a merchant and they're asking for something that like we just can't do. And it really takes like those people who can have these conversations in the room. And I think a lot of people are surprised when I say like, "Oh, I'm an engineer," because, you know, I'm being read as somebody who does not communicate like an engineer. I'm being read as somebody who's like more like empathetic in my communications and more like, I think maybe detail oriented. I don't know. I think anyone can be detail oriented, but there's a different like mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Go to a liberal school and also,
oh, you just
sorry, I don't know where I am, but but also like, I think bringing a lot of the ideas into the workplace itself, like making the workplace a better place for other people. So I think like for me in particular, that means like being more active in working with recruiting, working with like teams, like not my direct work, but internal efforts to support more women, support more people of color in the workplace. And I think like a lot of my liberal arts education, being able to take women's studies classes and like race studies classes at Vassar has allowed me to then like take a lot of these other concepts into making a more inclusive workplace as well. So I think it's like a cool thing I've been able to do.
Kelly, I love that. It's so true. There's still, even to this day, kind of the cliche of a coder, right? Like a coder can't talk to humans. Like people approach it that way. And then when they meet somebody who is, you know, very outgoing and communicative and expresses themselves, they're like, oh, you're a coder? That's crazy. I mean, I was experiencing it in the 90s. It's still around now. It's like such an old stereotype, but it's still around. But you realize that value when people, you know, see how well you express yourself, and that you can make coding, you can demystify coding because you can speak eloquently about it. People are suddenly like, oh, I want to work with you more, you know? Great. Any other thoughts about the liberal arts thing?
I think it, oh, sorry. Is somebody
Mario,
else?
I saw your hand up if you want to go.
Oh, go ahead, Mario.
So going back to actually this, like the first question that we're talking about in regards to the benefits of UX design that Carlos and Henry were mentioning, and tying it into what Kelly just mentioned about communications, this kind of reminds me of the benefits of design thinking. And even though I might not have like known it by that concept in Vassar, when you think about the classes that we take and the research that we're doing, we kind of, is ingrained in us thinking about whatever we're doing, who is it impacting, who is it for, how will it help them get them further and stuff like that. And one story that I always remember in my first job when I graduated working as a research assistant, I just remember the economists is giving presentations on papers that they have written, and they're speaking a language that is known by the other economists, but when you have like the other policymakers and the other people that are non-economists, it was just going over their heads. And that always resonated with me. So regardless of being in UX design for anyone, so I know different people were mentioning doing stuff in research or being a data scientist and stuff like that. Everything that you're doing is for a purpose. Whatever research you're doing, whatever app you're creating, whatever paper you're writing is for a purpose. How is it going to benefit that person and push them further? And then Kelly brings up an excellent point about communicating. Just because you've worked tirelessly on this particular thing that you've worked on doesn't mean that other people will understand it the same way too. So how you break it down for them to grasp it, and putting thought into the way you communicate. And I think Vassar and just a liberal arts degree helps with that, especially with you taking classes in so many different areas. You're finding different ways of grasping knowledge, and also finding different ways of presenting that knowledge to other people and how people interact with that. So yeah, the liberal arts degree is definitely very beneficial within that space.
For sure. And who did I cut off before? Was that Phil that was going to speak?
I think it was me.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd also just throw a pitch for like flexibility in the liberal arts, of exploring what you're interested in at the time, because it's I feel like a really unique opportunity to be able to do so. I think folks at other colleges, when they pick a major, they're like all in and have to take a lot of courses in that. I mean, I also viewed it like there are lots of skills that you can pick up on the job as well, or if you wanted to do like a boot camp or something else like that. You never know where your interests might take you as well. Like I had started out in academic science research. I did a lot in animal behavior in the biology department, and I did ERSI while I was at Vassar. And it's only when I kind of discovered design research that I realized I could like kind of leverage my research background to go into design, and then eventually, well, design research and technology is generally called user experience research, but yeah, so you never know where your interest might take you, and Vassar is a great place to explore as much of it as you can.
Yeah, and to that point, Henry, you know, bring your interests to work. I was going to mention, I've had the benefit of a lot of the folks that I work with within, and I'm sure the mentors would feel the same, within this space, this kind of digital creative space. That's not all they do. They all have hobbies that are, or interests that are, that I think are pretty cool and kind of add to who they are. You know, either somebody is a writer, or they're in a band, or they're, you know, or they're a painter, or whatever it is. So bringing those hobbies that you cultivate at Vassar and, you know, your other interests to work only adds to what you're bringing to the table. You know, for me, as I mentioned, I acted and I was in a band. I still play instruments, but I often, you know, talk about music and guitar with folks at work, and that's just something that we bring into the conversations we're having, you know, from a creative perspective. I'm sure others do the same.
I'd like to add something there. That, of course, sort of hobbies and sort of bringing your full self to work is a total advantage and something that I encourage everyone to do. But also life experiences and things like languages, for example, like working at a financial technology company in Latin America, like we're, you know, I often have to communicate to teams in English, Portuguese, or Spanish. And so I think bringing those experiences into the technology space can make as much of a difference as a certain technical skill. And talking about that, you know, people have highlighted communication and flexibility, but I'd also like to plug in critical thinking here. It's such a, you know, important skill. I cannot stress this enough. I think that oftentimes you'll have teams, you know, thinking about a product roadmap or a certain feature that they'd like to launch. And then oftentimes it's like, wait, but why are we really doing that? Like, why, how can we determine whether that's actually the most important thing to focus on right now? And so I think critical thinking is such a pivotal and really important skill that the liberal arts degree has given me. And I kind of really noticed this at work and the many different ways in which it plays out. You know, to develop technology in certain settings, for example, financial inclusion, you need a little bit of women's studies, you need a little bit of Africana studies, you need a little bit of sociology to understand urban studies even. So that can really make the difference in the workplace.
Yeah, one more piece of advice too that I have for the students is that if you're like me, and maybe this is a weird way that I viewed it when I was your age, but you know, going into the tech space and coming from Vassar, I think there is a tendency to not try to hide that fact that it's liberal arts, but, you know, maybe push it aside a little bit, right? We are competing with feeder schools like MIT, like Stanford, like Carnegie Mellon, that are located smack in the middle of these big tech centers. And, you know, to be quite frank with you, Vassar is not going to have those course offerings that those schools have, right? Let's just be frank. So there is that tendency to kind of hide that fact. But from my experience, I would actually argue that you should lean into it even more. Lean into the fact that you came from an environment, like others have said, that embraces different perspectives, empathy, diversity, different kinds of courses besides your vanilla, you know, CS 100 to CS 400, right? So lean into the fact on your cover letters and your resumes. Don't shy away from the fact that you came from Vassar and this liberal arts school if you're applying to those big tech jobs.
Yep.
I think it's going to benefit you. Another big benefit of Vassar, not necessarily a liberal arts benefit, but is the small class sizes. So at these big tech schools, you might have hundreds of kids per class. I think you guys have an opportunity, at least especially in the CS space, to do after hours with your professors. I mean, that's how I got a lot of the opportunities that I did from Vassar, is just talking to different professors in your department, going to the after hours, not just talking about the problem sets and the text and the exams, which you should do, but talk about your next steps and what opportunities are out there, what trends in the field there is. Because even though these people or these professors are in academia, they definitely have their finger on the pulse of the industry as well. And like you're taking advantage of these opportunities already in terms of coming to this event. So you're already ahead of the game, but just, kind of emphasize, keep doing this kind of stuff.
Oh.
Yeah, you're on, Cindy.
Oh, thanks. So, I was a fellow at MIT Open Doc Lab, which is part of comparative media studies for a while, and still I'm a fellow there. So to the note about tech schools versus Vassar, now, if you are a hardcore data science or crypto, cybersecurity type person, this doesn't necessarily apply to you. But if you are more into web app development, or I do a lot of I like to call it creative technology, which is regards to film it's not film anymore, it's video and audio. All of that is digital now, and it's is ripe for the for all sorts of platforms, as we've seen currently, the Zoom platform and numerous others. This tech, the ability to think broadly and deeply about how tech can be applied to whatever problem it is that you have. Is it getting video? Is it getting kids in school to be able to connect together? Is it enabling people to have a different kind of connection online instead of just these flat square screens? There's some really cool stuff that came out of IDFA, which is I guess they call it transmedia documentaries, or VR experiences or AR experiences, where, how do we solve the social problem of getting people to connect? So instead of us having these square screens, we'll be like in these little round screens, and we'll be put around a bar, since nobody can go to you guys are too young to go to a bar right now, but in a classroom or at the cafeteria or at a restaurant. How do you change the culture around technology? Again, it doesn't have to be as dry and as boring as the old personality stereotype that used to be there. So the more experiences you garner at Vassar that have to do with problem solving around technical areas will help you. And again, with the small class sizes, you have students that you will know. I mean, you probably will know most of your class by the time you graduate. These are people that you can talk to about anything and solve problems in small groups and really hammer out some really interesting thoughts.
Yep. Carlos, I saw you just put a point in the window there. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Just to echo really everything Cindy just said, because I think that, increasingly there's a saying there, I used to work in consulting before switching over to startups. And so there was a lot of work that we had to do in terms of not only developing the technology platforms themselves, but also kind of working with the organizational or the more human aspect of technology. And, there's a common phrase that was thrown around all the time, but eventually, every company, I think, will figure out a way to turn itself into a technology company, just because it's so hard to divide the work of any business from technology platforms and tools. And that is true for many, many things. Something I'm deeply interested in is educational technology. And like Cindy was just saying, there's a really important contribution to be made there in order to make technology tools so much more intuitive and easy to use to solve real human issues. And so I think that vision that I was a total social science humanities person, and now I find myself like thrown into a very, very technical, complicated field, and I don't know if I always saw myself in this, but now more than ever, I think that there's something to be said about that. Not only to be to make it easier for your users to use what you're designing and developing, but also to make the companies themselves and the field at large more accessible and more equitable.
Yeah, I really can't emphasize this point enough. And I want to ask the mentors a follow-up question on this. And students, please raise your hand if there's anything you want to chime in on. I may start calling on you, by the way, if you don't ask a question. But this topic of critical thinking and bringing that to work is so important. And I think we were just alluding to the idea, you know, whatever you're creating with technology, you're creating it for whoever you work for their clients, right? And you can tell the difference between somebody's output when they have not applied critical thinking to it, right? It's just not there. It's just not good enough, right? It doesn't come across. It's very cookie cutter, right? But the difference between that and somebody who's really applied additional points of view or critical thinking or has brought other perspectives to it, it just shines in a very different way. And it really helps from a career perspective when you start to see that. So what I wanted to ask the mentors is, how can these students who are going to be interviewing for their first jobs get that sort of thing across? And one of the things that was coming to mind to me was, you know, you can put on your resume all of your tech experience, and like Cindy was saying, you need experience to get experience, but you know, the work you've done at school, any kind of extracurricular tech work that you've done. But then you can also put on some of those hobbies, some of the other things that you've done, whether it's you know, hobbies like well, other languages you speak, or hobbies like guitar or something like that. All of that contributes to, when somebody's looking at your resume, that they see you're not just somebody who's kind of come out of a grinder and is just another coder or something, but somebody who has brought in these other perspectives. I'd love to hear any thoughts from the mentors on how the students can get that sort of thing across.
I just had, like, I'll answer that or contribute that, but I also want to follow up on something that Phil had said, where I think the benefits, we all know the benefits of liberal arts education, but other people might not. And sometimes they're just sticklers who like will only hire from like the Ivy Leagues or like certain schools or something. And that's kind of just, I don't know, a fact of the world from there. And I wouldn't feel too bad if you encounter one of those cases. But I think one of the best things you can do is, like, Callie was lucky of like having somebody who does acknowledge those benefits, or leveraging connections or people you know who can advocate for you. So alumni, like for Vassar, of course, but if you see like other people have gone to liberal arts colleges, they generally know as well. And in terms of getting across, I think, I don't know how common it is, but I think tech is interesting because sometimes they don't really care if you have a degree at all. It's like, as long as you can code or do your job. So in that way, it's very liberating. And, you know, boot camps are a way to kind of get those skills, but you could also do a lot of projects on your own just to show that you can do that. So I think having a portfolio always helps, at least for design and research. And I know some of my friends in product management or engineering just have projects that they've shown that they've worked on out of interest. And I think that shows, one, like your skills, but also that you have like a natural curiosity in this.
Yeah, great. Anything else from folks?
I guess, like, sorry, was someone else talking?
No, go ahead, Kelly.
Sorry. So one thing that I thought about from like the software engineering side, like so I've done a lot of recruiting for my current job at a firm. And one thing that I've seen a lot from students actually is really interesting projects. And you know, there's always that GitHub link that we're told to put at the top of our resume for software engineering jobs, and actually listing out the projects on the resume itself, because not everyone's going to click a link. But seeing the descriptions have been so cool, because you're seeing some of like the solutions that students are just solving in their communities, or something that they just felt like doing, or they went to a hackathon and the theme was community outreach, and then their solution was, I don't know, something very interesting. And I've seen students who put like, I built out my school's cafeteria website because we didn't have one, and it was really hard for students to know like what was on the menu, just things like that. And I think there's definitely a lot of room to do that. And even if it doesn't actually get used, you're showing that like you care about this issue and you've thought enough to create a solution, and maybe you worked with other people, so now you have this like, oh, I can work with other people and build this awesome product. So definitely plus one on the portfolio.
Absolutely. Other thoughts? What else can folks do?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Henry and Kelly mentioned about the portfolio. It helps to show like your interest in particular areas based upon the different projects you worked on. Like Kelly mentioned, it helps with showing how you're able to collaborate with different types of people. Building a little bit on that, whether it's in the portfolio or also, especially in your cover letter and your interview, just telling that story of talking about, let's say you working on a project or you work on a paper, how you've gone through like your thought process, like what was something that you're passionate about, what were the different challenges they dealt with, what were the different types of solutions that you went through, and what you learned from that. And even if it didn't work out, I think showing the extent of how you push yourself in terms of trying different things and working with different people, and even if you didn't come up with the solution you wanted, but just like coming to that realization, that is great critical thinking and pushing yourself within that space. Also tied to the, whether you do this in your cover letter or your interview or in the portfolio on your GitHub, even just talking about the different types of resources that you use and like referencing that too, it shows like how, you know, worldly you are in terms of like looking for different solutions and pulling in different elements, which also is a great element of critical thinking.
Love it.
If I can just add a couple of things there, I think that there already on the Vassar campus there are many opportunities, I think, to develop these interests or to try to explore them a little bit more. Like I remember I did a little bit of research with the Poughkeepsie Farm Project last summer, and that was really, now that I think about it, that was total design researcher and user research before I even knew that that's what it was called. And then I also was like the multimedia assistant at the Loeb, so we like were developing the blog platform. You know, 10 or 11 years ago, this was like a very basic WordPress, but you know, I was already getting like my digital design chops going there, and so I think that there are any number of opportunities, academic or extracurricular, that you can already you know, try to get into. There's well, of course, in this remote world, any number of opportunities have opened up even further. But I think already in the Vassar universe, a lot of those little side projects and things that you can use to put in front of employers or internships, that they're totally available. So I would encourage that kind of proactivity and exploration in that sense.
Yeah, excellent. So to the sophomores, I hope that was helpful. I'd love to hear if any of you has a project you're working on that you're particularly happy about, or if you're wondering if it's something you would mention in an interview or on a resume. Be happy to bring it to this group and see what we think. If anybody has something you'd want to talk about, raise your hand. While you're thinking about that, Byram, I'm gonna ask you, because you had brought up the idea of UX and how it affects people. We talked quite a bit about UX. Did that resonate with you? Any thoughts from what the team talked about?
Yeah, it's just really interesting to hear everything you're all saying. I'm not sure if I have any immediate questions, but.
Oh, that's fine. Great. Anyone have any projects they're working on that they'd want to bring up? I see Sarah shaking her head no. Okay. You don't have to come off mute, I could see it. All right, so I'd like to keep going down the tech stack a little bit. We spent a lot of time on the front end. I'd like to start moving a bit towards the back end. Let's talk coding first, and Kelly, I'll call on you for a bit. I'd love for you to tell the team a little bit about, you know, what a day in the life is like from a software engineering perspective.
Yeah, so obviously caveated with I've only worked at 2 different companies, so just gonna like say that I can't speak for all software engineering jobs, but from my experience, actually both jobs have been pretty similar. So I work very closely with UX designers, product managers, UI designers. I've always worked on, in the beginning, I started on full stack projects, but actually moved towards backend and still actually I'm working really closely with a lot of different cross-functional partners, and it's been really cool. So like, I don't know, the day-to-day feels kind of like I wake up and code, but like kind of project lifecycle type things is like depending on the project, it could be like a small feature or like a completely new product line from the company. And essentially what happens is this is either presented to me through my manager or someone from product, and they say like, how do we want to prioritize this? How long do you think it's going to take? And so my job is really to look at breaking down the work and understanding, using like my critical thinking and understanding like how long is this piece going to take, and I take into account, is something wrong with deploys at the company right now? Are these random factors that are happening in the world going to hold us back? Like, are there a lot of vacation days between now and then? And so I have to look at a lot of these pieces and understand, can this get done in this time frame? And if not, what is the time frame? And then I present that back to the managers, like product and engineering, and understand exactly like, and then we kind of have a back and forth. Like there's that, you know, back and forth that a lot of other people have mentioned of like, well, what is absolutely crucial for our launch, and what can we do, and how many people do I need to pull onto this project, and how can we deal with that? And then that goes into like, actually breaking down the work into concrete tasks. We call them tickets. Other people might call them something else, but we call them tickets, and essentially like start assigning the work to people, and then we start coding. And then in that, my team is really focused on code review and code quality. So we all like review each other's code, we get involved, we help each other out, we pair program and stuff like that. And then we have continuous deploy, but in a previous job we had like essentially like every month we would release a version. And so depending on what that process is, we would just like push the code out, and then your code is suddenly like out and people can see it, and it's really cool. But then you fix all the bugs that come in after after people report them, or you see something going wrong and you're alerting. So it's kind of like my project life cycle, and sometimes it's a few at the same time, or sometimes it's just one. Yeah.
Kelly, that's awesome. And I love that. Another example of bringing critical thinking to work. I mean, in this field, we're constantly estimating, right, how long things are going to take to get done. A mentor of mine once said, you know, as a delivery lead, which is kind of what I'm called now, I've moved from, you know, coding again to kind of delivering for teams. You need to be able to see everything between today and the launch and beyond, right? You need to be able to think about every step of the way. What are the key milestones? What are the risks? How are we mitigating those risks? That critical thinking comes in so handy for that, because once you estimate something, you know, somebody might say, just give me a rough estimate, but they're going to hold you to it, right? Even though they're saying, no, just give me a quick back of the napkin thing, they're still going to hold you to it. So you really have to put in the thought to think about how long something's going to take, and to be able to see all the different factors that come into play there. I love that that example. You know, you mentioned you're a full stack developer, right, Kelly?
So I used to be, but about a year ago, I transitioned to backend. But my team still kind of owns full stack solutions. So as a backend engineer, I have to think about how it'll impact the front end.
I was just going to ask you to explain in case the sophomores don't know the term full stack developer.
Got it. So I've worked primarily in web apps. So I don't know, some people have said they've worked on it or like do designs for that. And so what that means is like I could say the exact tech stacks that I've worked with. It's like a Python backend, and then on the front end, it's like JavaScript through various different JavaScript, what are they called? Frameworks. And so I'm working on both pieces. So the front end is like, you know, I think we kind of all know what front end is, but like in a web app in particular, it's like what the user is seeing. But those web apps generally are calling backend endpoints through like an API call. So it'll say like /API, and then that backend will return data. And so working full stack means that you are essentially following that data all the way from the database, all the way to like how it's presented to the user. And so that's why, like, as a backend engineer, I'm still thinking about the front end, because I'm thinking about like, I have all this data in a database. How am I going to get it to the front end? And so I have to look at a design. For my current project, I was given a UI design. They were like, this is what the page looks like. And so I have to think about like what's in the database, what's there. And so full stack means that I just build out the whole flow, and backend for me is just getting that backend like API to return the correct data.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, I wanted everybody to hear that in case they didn't know it, because it's so important. And it's such a great skill to be able to code from a full stack perspective, to understand not just how to code front end, but how to get data from the back end, how those things tie together. It's a great skill to see on a resume, a great experience to have. And it also, I mean, as a lot of you are talking about in your introductions that you're kind of exploring, you know, you've started coding. As you start coding and exploring the different aspects of this industry, it's absolutely worth going beyond just the front end. If you're just tinkering with the front end at this point, that's fine. But start to think about, you know, how you would pull data, start working with some databases, different sources, APIs that are out there that you can tap into to populate your front end. So you get that full stack experience. And it might open your mind to other areas that you want to either be a part of besides front end, or, you know, or other areas of interest. Great. Any other thoughts from the mentors on those topics? Okay, if not, I wanted to keep moving down the stack. So I'd love to hear from some of our data science folks to talk a little bit about what that's like. You know, I think to me, Rohan talked about the next frontier. I think data analysis, data science, and security is such a huge part of everything right now that we're doing. And it's the more folks who understand that and are great at it, I think those are going to be very called for skills in the coming years. I mean, they are now, but they will continue to be. I'd love to hear maybe Mario, if you want to start a little bit about a day in the life around data science.
Yeah, definitely. I've actually been in like the type of situation where you're working with software engineers, UX, UX researchers, designers, and stuff like that, all these different types of people together on one team. That was actually my first project with Homeland Security investigations. So we helped the agents when it came to creating tools to help them with like human trafficking and drug trafficking and stuff like that. So it was really cool working with all these different people, learning from them, especially as a data scientist within that space, because I don't have the front end or the back end experience. But that one was cool. You know, similar to Kelly's situation, we had Jira where we had all our different tickets. So we're working in sprints. You know, when different things didn't work out, we would push things back or put things on the back, the backlog and stuff like that. So that was a good structured system. In my current role, I work solo and I work directly with the agent. So I'm like a one-man team, which in some ways is good because I have a lot of independence, but at the same time, it also sucks because like, who can I talk to if I don't have like a solution to a problem? So I guess like a day-to-day would be connecting with the agents, figuring out what are the details of the case that they're working on. A lot of these different cases are ongoing, so day-to-day could be the same thing. And just using code to help them with their case. So it could be data extraction. So maybe they have evidence from their case, like a bunch of PDFs. They want me to pull data out of it. Or they have like cryptocurrency wallet addresses. They want me to track it and stuff like that. So it's cool to work independently and try to come up with different solutions. I think some of the challenges are one, just not having that ability to talk to as many people as I want to about how I'm progressing. And two, going back to this like constant theme about whatever work you're doing it for someone. I'm dealing with a group of people that are very smart, very accomplished in their work, but are not, don't have the same type of tech skills that I have. So I have to ask myself if whatever I'm producing is helping them in their work. So asking the right questions, and also making sure that whatever I'm producing, I'm not going too far, too deep into the rabbit hole, so that I'm going like away from the investigation. But it's really exciting, and I really do like doing this work within investigations. And going back to, I think it was Rohan that mentioned like how tech is like the new frontier, and it's exciting working with this type of client because they're always trying to look for new ways of getting things done, and they're very open to hearing about these new ways and like trying to implement them.
That's awesome. Thanks, Mario. Another great example of critical thinking too. Phil, anything you would add from a data science perspective?
Yeah, so yeah, I mentioned earlier in the call that I had been in a startup right after grad school. And so, I've been, and this is a generalization, but I would argue like this, the smaller the company, the more hats you have to wear, right? So you kind of have to be a jack of all trades, for lack of a better term. But yeah, because like different problems are going to get thrown at you. And yeah, you kind of have to be flexible, very flexible, and take the punches as they come to get the product out the door as soon as you possibly can. But anyway, so in that smaller setting, I did get the chance to have kind of that more agile development experience that Kelly was talking about, where you have essentially a set of tasks and instructions sent to you by a project manager or product manager or whoever it may be, maybe the customer themselves. And you kind of iteratively and systematically take those tickets off the board and get your work done in kind of 2-week sprints. And so that was kind of the first few years of my career, and doing that as kind of the only data scientist embedded on that team. So actually similar to Mario's situation where I didn't have many people above me to ask for advice or mentorship. And now I'm at a larger company, and the larger the company gets, the more specialized each individual team can be. So I'm on a team now with I'm one of 2 teams, and we have about 12 data scientists in total. And that allows us to specialize a lot more, right? So all those tasks that need to get done tomorrow or the day afterward can kind of be pushed over to a different team, and we can take things a little bit more slowly, right? So I think as you go to the more established and larger organizations, you'll find that data scientists, they still have to wear many hats, but you're not necessarily locked into that 2-week iteration process. At the end of the day, you're asking questions about data, and a lot of those questions are best guesses or they're hypotheses. And a lot of the times the experiments that you run or the ideas that you have may not pan out. So sometimes it's difficult to put an end date on the answer to a question. And that's one of the most difficult jobs I have as a manager, is communicating that upwards to those expectations, outwards to clients and upwards to leadership, to say, well, I can't have a solution for you next week, but I can promise we'll think about it for a really long time and basically bang our heads against the wall as much as we possibly can, because we've done really good work in the past for different problems. You could trust that if we can't get this done, that it can't get done, right? So, you can make those kind of arguments, and then you can kind of push the people underneath you to commit to performing certain experiments within certain time constraints. And that's the big thing, I think, about being a data scientist, is that at the end of the day, you can't make up what the data doesn't show, what the data shows, right? And so whatever you deliver, whatever product you deliver, and a lot of times this is going to take the form of a model that you've trained your specific data on. Whether the customer is internal or external, they're going to at some point in the future have to use that product. So you have to be as specific as possible with the intention of the product, its limitations in terms of, let's say, an accuracy or like an optimization metric that you're using. So if you're expecting it not to work 100% of the time perfectly, which is very commonly the case for your recommendation system or for any predictions that your model is going to make, that has to be communicated, right? And then the internal team who's using that model or the customer has to be aware that there's going to be some false positives and some false negatives that come out of that. So you can't hide that stuff, right? You have to show outwards that there is going to be some limiting factors here, and that's just a fact of life. And then you can kind of make the argument, well, okay, if you pay us for another year, we can push it forward 2 or 3 more ticks in terms of the accuracy. But a lot of times you'll be surprised when you deliver something and you're honest about how much it's going to tackle. People end up saying, well, that's fine for my use case. I don't really need to worry about it. And I'll deal with the noise, like no concerns here, right? So that kind of communication process is really important, communicating expectations and limitations with the stakeholders. Yeah, in the day in the life, right? Like I said, where I'm collecting different data sources from internal teams. It's the one thing about being a data scientist, right? You have to have knowledge in math, specifically in linear algebra and matrix math, matrix multiplication, things like that. That's a course at Vassar you can take, obviously, discrete math. You have to have some knowledge in databases, so relational and NoSQL, SQL, things like that, both in terms of potentially building them and building the schema that you can use to query them, but also the queries themselves. And that's more typical for a data scientist role, is that you'll be asked to tackle a problem and there'll be some big database or some series of different tables within different databases that you have to somehow unify together in a way that makes sense for your problem. And then the whole data science lifecycle from getting the data and then exploring it. Data is often extremely noisy, so you have to make some intelligent decisions early on about which data you want to include and which data you want to exclude. And then, iteratively going through the process of building a model out, understanding your goal, and essentially looping back into the beginning and being aware that you could deliver something that doesn't meet expectations and you have to start over from scratch, right? And that's part of science, and that's part of the scientific process, right? You try to be as empirical as you possibly can, but at the end of the day, you're trying to deliver something specific and with not necessarily the exact data that you need, right? And so communication is big. Being squeezed from all sides happens a lot. And then, yeah, just kind of being honest, running honest statistical tests about your data, not overselling what you're delivering, and a lot of other constraints like that are some problems I typically deal with.
That's awesome, Phil. Thank you. I feel like that was actually a mini data science course you were giving there. I feel like real quick, I just wanted to make a quick announcement. We were going to break out into breakout rooms because we have such a small group. It's actually not going to be worth it. I think we'll just stay all here and chat together. Phil, picking up on what you were just saying, there's a theme that just came out between Kelly and Mario and Phil about the teams that we all work on. In case that wasn't clear, and I know that's not unique to this industry, but in technology, when you're delivering for technology, you're very much going to be part of a team that is representing a lot of these different kind of disciplines that we've been talking about, because nobody does great UX and great visual design and great front end and back end development and great QA and great data. No one person does all that. So you typically have to bring in experts, subject matter experts, or developers of different disciplines on the team. So you'll be working in teams like that in your day-to-day as you start to venture into this field, which is great and can be fun. But it's also something that the more you start doing that now, coding with folks. Kelly mentioned pair programming is a possible thing to do as well. The more you get that experience of working with others on a project, that'll start to come in very handy, because you're very much going to be part of a team of experts that are all working together, especially when you get into fields like data and cybersecurity and things that are highly specialized and take a lot of depth to really get. And Phil, I think you're also our cybersecurity guy, if you wanted to give any kind of talk on that as well.
Yeah, so tech is funny in general, because I think someone had mentioned this earlier in the call. Every company is going to become a tech company at some point, right? So I could be a master of statistics and I can have a handle on every new state-of-the-art programming language that's out there and have like the perfect technical resume, but throw me into a cybersecurity firm where I know nothing about the data, or a financial firm. For me, for example, I don't know much about how the world of finance works, or how the world of retail or entertainment, or so whatever other field there is, right? I'm going to come into that situation with a lack of understanding about that specific data, and I'm going to have to learn it on the fly. And that's very common, right? No one's going to come in with a specific skill set that you need for every job you have. But I think that's one of the most fun parts of being in a technical field, is that you don't necessarily get a formal education in something like cybersecurity, which there are actually very few universities and colleges that offer course offerings for specifically cybersecurity at the undergraduate level, at least. But then you interact with people who have gone out and gotten masters and been at a few years at different companies who have interacted in that specific space, and you're communicating your expertise to them, and then kind of vice versa, right? So for example, for me, over the last 5 years, I've learned a ton about security just by working on projects with, like you said, these subject matter experts who I have to design products for. So I have to understand what their specific use cases are. And as I'm doing that, I'm understanding, whoa, that makes a lot of sense. And then I read more about it, I get interested, and read some books, or whatever it may be, take a course that's at my that my company offers, like on reverse engineering or some other kind of random security related topic. And the pandemic actually makes this harder because you're not sitting next to the subject matter experts anymore. So you actually have to go out of your way a lot more to be inquisitive and ask a lot of questions. But anyway, I'm not sure if I answered the question, but just kind of stream of consciousness there.
Yeah, and I want to get to the topic you just hit on around how COVID's changed our industry and how it will continue in the future. Before we do, we got about 15 minutes left. Sophomores, I'm not hearing a lot. Say something. No, it's okay. But do raise your hand or put in the chat if there's other topics you want us to discuss. We've just been kind of going organically, but if we're not, we've only got 15 minutes left. So if there's something you want to hear us, oh, Rohan, yeah, please.
Hi, let me lower my hand. Yeah.
Thank you.
So as we were just speaking about, every company is going to be a tech company, et cetera, et cetera. The jobs that you hold now, at least I assume for the most part, didn't exist when you left college. And ours will probably be the same. Do you have any suggestions for how to prepare, given that we don't know what kind of jobs will exist when we enter the workforce?
Great question. Anyone want to take it? Henry, you raised your hand. Is that to answer this question?
Oh, that was to talk about something else, but I can answer that.
Sure.
Because I think UX research is a field kind of like that, where it didn't really exist maybe a decade ago, and it was a lot of people just coming from other backgrounds in sociology or anthropology, or HCI is relatively older. But I think just focusing on your interests and gaining skills from that is your best bet, and then finding other people who have done the path before you and seeing what that's been like, or how you can leverage transferable skills. Or a lot of it can also just be storytelling, the type of story you tell of why your interests or your skills kind of map onto this role and what you can do. And I do think there's a sweet spot, because now there are actual courses for masters in HCI, and it's really annoying when people think you need to do a master's degree to do this job. But I mean, that's my opinion. It can be a mixed blessing. Some people do really just want to be able to get a degree and then feel prepared to do a job.
Yeah, and I think Phil was even mentioning it, what he was saying, none of us are at our first job, right? Even Kelly, you're the newest grad, I think, and you're at your second job now. Your first job's not gonna be your last. I think you have to follow, to me, I think you have to follow your current interest, your current passion, and see where that takes you. It's gonna be stepping stones, right? You're gonna learn a lot on the job from those teams you work on, and that's gonna steer you in directions that you probably would not pick right now, because you're going to get more experience, and you're going to, your perspective is going to change, and you're going to want to get into different things. And I think it's going to happen very organically. But I think don't try to overwhelm yourself with, this has to be my ideal job. It really just has to be your first job, right? Any other thoughts on that from the team?
Yeah, I would say, I love do sort of mentoring, and I do this efforts like this often. And there's something I always love to talk about when people are like, oh my god, but my first job, like, what is it going to be? I'm super nervous and anxious about that. And, I really always love to talk about additive experience. So thinking about each job as like a certain milestone or a certain environment that's going to help develop you in one way or another. And I think that whether you are on sort of the more human end of things with UX, or more on the back end things with either engineering or data stuff, I think that the boom that technology is seeing right now, also the sort of pulverization of like traditional technology hubs is also, changing. I think that whether you're on those two ends of things, there will be opportunities, even though everyone's freaking out about automation and all those things. Technology, I think we can be sure is going to play a big role in our lives until we're no longer here, probably. So I think working on your agility and your adaptability, your resilience, whether you're a data person or whether you're a UX person, it helps to know about the other area and vice versa, because you'll be this flexibility and this resilience, this adaptability will be demanded of you, not only as the field changes, but also in your teams every day. So I would say work on that. It's super hard. It's often even harder than learning coding languages or anything else.
That's great, Carlos. Yeah, be curious and follow your curiosity. Really good. Let's go to another question. Sarah.
Yeah, so hold on, let me lower my hand quickly before I forget.
You're all very polite with this hand stuff.
As like a non-comp sci major, I kind of wanted to loop back to the idea of like building a portfolio in technology, because I may or may not take more comp sci classes. I may or may not like learn different languages, sort of like any advice on how to get my foot in the door with that, like useful like websites or things I could do to like sort of start to build my knowledge, because I might not take more comp sci classes than Vassar.
Yeah, anybody want to take it?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Someone. Okay, got it. Because Sarah, I think earlier on you mentioned that you are going on the statistics track in math, right?
Yeah, I did.
Gotcha. So, a suggestion, something you could do is you could still build a portfolio. One way you could do it is like maybe with the either different projects that you've worked on in Vassar, or same thing like doing a project on your own. Maybe you can find like a data set, data.gov, or so many different sources where you can find like free data sets, working on it, doing your analysis on it. And maybe you could like write an article about your process of the hypothesis you're looking into, and just the different steps and stuff like that. And you can even like go further. Maybe you could like write that article and put it on Medium. That's a way to build a portfolio. Tied into this piece that you're writing, you could also maybe make like a PowerPoint and make some data viz around it. And you can also post that either on a GitHub or create your own like website through like Squarespace or what's the other one called? Yeah, like Squarespace or something like that. So that's a way you could build your portfolio. It's just like showing something you're interested in, and like showing the thought process that you put behind it. And that's like a good conversation starter, whether it's like in your interview or something else.
That's great, Martin. Other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was gonna say the product that I'm working on now, actually, Kaggle, it's a data science platform, but they have a lot of courses. I mean, lots of places have courses on there, but Kaggle also has these competitions that you can do. So they're like projects that you can work on, not necessarily to win, but just to have like a practice problem to work on. And it'll like score your code or your submission from there. And so that's something that you can always show. And there's a bunch of past ones as well. You can look for something that's interesting to you. There's also introductory ones, like for the Titanic, it's just the themed ones where you're like trying to assess who would survive. But yeah, there's lots of stuff online too.
And Sarah, I think you mentioned also that you were interested in sort of research things, like definitely with, you know, a statistics skill set. We like to see sort of research portfolios that really quickly tell us how you go about how you are as a problem solver. So really what, you know, what kind of problem you were facing, what kind of methods or things you did to try to find out more about it, and then ultimately what kind of impact or what solution you delivered. So focusing on, I think Mario was mentioning focusing a lot on process. That's so important. You know, a hiring team or an interviewer will of course care about your final product and what you delivered, but the selection processes are oftentimes more centered on how you think and what how you tackle problems and how potentially you collaborate with others to get to solutions. So always really stressing process and approaches more than, I guess, you know, polished delivery.
Yeah, and you could also, I mean, like be creative with what interests you or what questions you have. I find those are like easier to work on. So I was just thinking like, you could do something with Rate My Professor or whatever. Like, you know, there's data there, and like try to do something relevant to Vassar or like the campus or yeah, anything else.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Henry. I mean, so you know, basically keep tinkering, right? Keep using the technology in something that's interesting to you or to the community. Yeah, if you see something at Vassar that might be interesting to use data or technology for, or around the neighborhood, anything like that could even be impactful and fun.
Can I jump
Please,
in?
Kelly, yeah.
I would also recommend if you want like maybe more structured learning or you know, something, I don't know. I have a hard time following online classes and those types of things. And so I have not personally done these, but I know a lot of people who have looked for like fellowships or like I think Square has like a 1 to 2 week intensive over the winter semester for like tech. And so I think a lot of those programs have data analysis, data science, and engineering. So I would definitely look into that. And then if you do one of those programs, you're also getting probably connected to people in the industry who can kind of open doors for you if, you know, just to broaden your network there.
That's great. Thanks. Sarah, great question. Thank you. I think we have time. We have a few minutes. Eric, I think we have time for your question.
Yeah, my question is actually pretty similar to Sarah's, and you guys kind of answered a lot of it, but I guess I'll go a little more in detail. So like going back to portfolios and projects. So I'm on the soccer team at Vassar, and after high school, I kind of, you know, thinking in the last 6 months or so, as I got into more tech-based stuff, I've thought, you know, of like a tool that would be useful for high school athletes, but like I have necessarily like, you know, the idea for it, but it would require, you know, a lot of tech and a lot of stuff that's way beyond my scope of knowledge at the moment. So I guess my question is like kind of how to approach like building the project or something like that, because I just don't, not that I don't know where to start, but I just want to make sure like my idea was, you know, start basic with just like maybe, you know, front end stuff or, you know, stuff I actually know how to do, and then slowly kind of branch out. And I was just kind of wondering if that's a good idea / what should be done.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just start real quick. I think that's exactly how I would start. But, you know, we talked about being part of a team. If you know others who might have some of those other skills and you could form a group to kind of work on it together, that might also be a great experience. And you could, you know, you could learn from them and learn from each other. Anybody have other thoughts on that?
I would say think about what your MVP could be, like your minimum viable product. So perhaps to realize the full vision and the full idea that you have in your head, you like need a team of 10 people. But think about what it is that you need to do or come up with so that it works at a basic level and does sort of like 1 or 2 things really well. That's actually a really hard part, to really do the rounds of thinking necessary to like distill it and then develop it enough so that it is at its minimum possible, you know, existence to be a successful product.
Or even start with a prototype or a proof of concept, right?
There you go. Yeah, I like a mock-up. Like it doesn't need to be like a real thing for it to serve you well when you're looking for a job or an internship. It can just easily be a prototype or like a mock-up type thing.
Yeah, and those could be like really low fidelity too. I think often where I would get stuck is like, I think I have to have this like really awesome looking product or something, but honestly, it takes a lot of work just to think through like, what does the screen look like? What would it do? What are these other things? And I think there's a lot of value even if you like drew a sketch on a piece of paper from there and like talked about like what would happen from there. And then if there's like a simple feature that you can start working on and just show, I think there's a lot to show of just your thought process in thinking that. And you could also, you know, do user interviews to like validate with people, like, would this actually be helpful, and all of that.
And you know, the heartbeat of the tech world is definitely the sprints. I think a couple of people have mentioned that, but really, if you wanna give yourself the challenge of like this summer or over winter break or whenever, just to give yourself the challenge. Okay, like I'm gonna do 3 sprints on this and see where I am at in 6 weeks. Like that's also a fun challenge to see where you can get, you know, in 2-week increments. Breaking down the problem and breaking down the product, and then see where you get, sort of as a fun challenge. And you can get together with others and do this as well. In fact, I think there's websites and sites where you can even find teams to work on your idea.
Yeah. I think IDEO has something like that where it's like a human-centered design. They just like give you a framework to work on a problem where you can like pick any problem, but it goes through like the stages of what you do in a design sprint. Or I don't know if they call it a sprint, something.
They're probably branded it their own way and sold it like 5 times the price. But
Eric, I hope that was helpful. That's a good question.
Yeah, very helpful. Thanks, guys.
Sorry, I just have, just one more point. Would definitely, I think, go back to something Phil said like way at the beginning of this session, but like use your professors. There are a lot of professors who have built apps, who have done mobile apps in particular, if you're looking for a mobile app, web apps, or just like have worked in these situations. So I would say like definitely think about, I think I had a professor, I don't know if he's still there, Tom Ellman, who had worked on games, and I was interested in the gaming industry for a while. And so he was able to say like, here, this is how you do Unity. And he pointed me to like a lot of tutorials that I could just do on my own, and got me like a Lynda account or something like that. So there was a lot of doors that got opened that way for me, but and then also like, so don't just think about like your teams that you're working on, it's just your peers, but think about your professors, like mentors, like people in this room that are talking to you right now can also be there to kind of consult and guide if you need it.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And one thing I wanted to bring up is like thinking about.
Is this why your hand is up?
Sorry.
Is this why your hand is up? I wanted to get to that.
I'll lower my hand now. But like just asking about like what your mentor could, or people you know can do for you. Like at this point, I can, if you see an internship or something at Google, like I can refer you, and that will at least get a human to look over your resume. Like some people at smaller places might be able to like directly hire you or something, or also do a referral or put in a good word or something like that. So that's always helpful, just to think about like what your ask is or what your goal is, and see if they can help with that.
That's a great topic to end on, Henry. I think, yeah, it's been great getting to chat with all you sophomores. Thank you for asking the questions. And your hand etiquette is fantastic. I'm not kidding. Like I'm in meetings at my company where somebody raises a hand and it's up for the rest of the meeting, even after they've asked the question. So thank you for doing that.